Last time on Darkcore Frontiers, Nex is pulled aboard the mysterious Space Authority vessel, the Nebula Nighthawk. Nex meets a crew of eccentric characters, including First Officer Slime, the gruff engineer Ironclaw, and the mysterious Captain Grimhelm. As the Nighthawk descends onto a hellish, storm-racked planet for emergency repairs, Nex assists the repair crew while trying to keep his true identity hidden. But Ironclaw's cryptic warning and a shocking discovery in the ship's cargo hold suggest that Nex's troubles are far from over. Darkcore Frontiers, Season 1, The Stowaway, by Thomas Chase. Episode 7, Ghosts of Planets Past.
Here.
Slime gurgled, his bulbous eyes swiveling towards a nondescript door.
Your accommodations, such as they are.
Nex found himself in a bare room within the Nebula Nighthawk's living quarters. The space was small, barely large enough for a narrow bunk and personal storage.
Rest. The captain will summon you when he's ready.
The door slid shut and the lock clicked. Finally alone. He surveyed his surroundings and sank onto the thin mattress. DC hovered nearby. Here he was, light years from the nearest jump point, trapped on a pirate ship pretending to be a Space Authority vessel, surrounded by a bunch of killers and madmen. And the really crazy part was the Nebula Nighthawk that was basically his prison right now might actually be his ticket out of there. The alternative, getting nabbed by the real Space Authority, meant just cold interrogation rooms and detention centers. No thanks. So for now, he had to play it cool, be the good little prisoner. Bide his time, wait for his chance. Next time they made planetfall, he would make like a shadow and disappear. Nex's eyelids grew heavy. He awoke to a harsh buzzing. Before he could respond, his door slid open. Legatron stood outside.
Captain wants to see you.
Slime's voice came from somewhere inside the droid's pelvis.
Situation room, now.
Nex followed the smooth movements of Legatron up to the top deck. Here in the early shift, the bridge was manned by just one deck officer. Outside, stars appeared stretched by the great speed of the ship. Occasionally, static-like eddies twinkled past the viewport. Nex squeezed his fists, following Legatron through a side door into the ship's situation room. The situation room was in keeping with the streamlined design of the rest of the vessel. A wide viewport, long metal holotable, and basic seating, with one security console in the corner. At the far end of the table sat Captain Grimhelm. His green helmet pulsed with light. Probably not a good sign.
Sit.
He gestured to a chair with a bony finger. Nex sat down, and the chair felt like it was designed by someone who hated butts. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the whisper of Grimhelm's life support. He leaned forward, his hollow eyes and pinpricks of blue light locked onto Nex.
Listen here, you little knave. You think you can pull a fast one on me?
Nex's mouth went dry.
I don't know what you mean, Captain.
How did he figure it out?
Don't insult my intelligence. I'm not a fool and neither are you. I know you came from that supply fleet, so let's try this again. Who are you really?
For a second, Nex thought about sticking to his story, but as he looked into Grimhelm's bright eyes, he knew it was too dangerous. This was a being who had seen too much to be fooled by a desperate lie. Nex's shoulders sagged.
Yeah, okay. I was on the supply fleet, Captain, but I swear I'm not with the Space Authority. I'm just a stowaway.
Grimhelm leaned back with self-satisfaction.
Ah, just a stowaway. But that's not all, I think.
Honestly, that's everything, sir. My parents, they've been gone for 5 years. I've been planet hopping ever since, hitching rides on whatever ship I can. I was going to ride this one out to the mining colony, then bounce to another off-world ship.
He fixed Nex with a stare.
Do you know you are responsible for blowing an operation that took 9 months of planning and cost me almost 1 million credits? I ought to have you thrown out of the airlock for that alone.
Nex's mouth fell open. For a second, he was sure this was it. He was about to become space debris, but he managed to find his voice.
Look, I'm not exactly a fan of the Space Authority either, Captain. I was just trying to slow you guys down a bit. I never thought anyone would actually die. Seriously, Captain, I didn't mean for that to happen.
Grimhelm's empty eyes continued to bore into him.
You think I give a hoot about some credit-sucking warp dogs? Those trigger-happy mercenaries knew the risks when they signed up. Let me tell you something. The clients who hire us for these jobs don't take kindly to failure. So while you were sleeping on my ship, thinking you're some kind of hero, I had a conference with my contact. What do you think I told him?
About me?
Grimhelm laughed.
I told them one of our insiders hath betrayed our trust.
Nex shook his head.
Why didn't you just tell him the truth, Captain?
He leaned forward.
For the same reason I haven't had you killed. Because, frankly, you're fascinating to me. For example, do you realize that on an operation of this scale, we paid tens of thousands of credits to obtain a single decryption key? If that one key fails, we fail. But you, a stowaway, a piece of space flotsam, you come waltzing in with your tin can sidekick, and suddenly you're flipping security systems on and off like child's play with a music box. Now do you understand why we're having this conversation?
He waited for Nex to speak, but he was lost.
No, Captain.
Grimhelm's helmet tilted, the green glow intensifying.
Because there's something about you, and I don't know what it is.
Nex looked across at him. Grimhelm growled.
And you're not going to tell me.
Nex shook his head. He paused, skeletal fingers drumming against the table.
We'll be making planetfall soon, picking up some specialists for our next job.
Planetfall. Nex nodded, his mind already racing to thoughts of escape.
In the meantime, you'll make yourself useful and assist Dr. Slime in his laboratory.
It was pretty clear this wasn't a suggestion. He stood up, trying not to look too eager to get out of there. Captain Grimhelm nodded toward the corner of the room. Nex's backpack sat there, pockets half closed and mussed.
It's yours. Take it.
Nex hefted the backpack onto his shoulder and turned to leave.
Oh, and one more thing. I told you we're making planetfall because you're going to think about running. I will let you run. But if you run, you'll keep running. If you stay, I can offer you food, a place to sleep, and protection. Think about it.
Grimhelm dismissed him with a wave of his cybernetic hand. Nex left the situation room. Was he telling the truth? Was he really going to let Nex run? Part of him doubted it. It had to be a trap. But even if it was, the second they hit dirt, Nex could outfox a crusty old pirate like Grimhelm. He was ready to ditch this creepshow. Nex followed Legatron back down to Slime's laboratory. As the door slid open, his nose prickled at the smell of antiseptic and burning electrical circuits. Bioengineered limbs in various stages of construction lined the workbenches, connected to electrodes and artificial plasma. Continuous streams of data rolled across screens, neural network patterns that Nex recognized as AI decision-making parameters. A series of darkened robot prototypes stood against the walls, slumped over in grotesque humanoid mockeries. In one corner, a mountain of empty discarded boxes was stacked almost up to the ceiling. Slime sat at a jumbled workstation and quickly closed his computer when Nex entered.
Ah, you. You're here. Good. You're just in time to join me for breakfast.
He waved Nex to a seat and held out a tray. cream-colored pods writhed on the plate, their segmented bodies leaving a faint trail of nectar.
I have an archaean vanilla worm, rich in antioxidants, and completely free of sodium chloride, of course. No salt for poor old Slime. Don't be shy now. They're quite the delicacy. Perhaps you'd like to watch them squirm a bit more before you taste?
Nex hesitated, then picked one up. His teeth sank through the outer skin. It was like a custard-filled water balloon popped in his mouth, but it tasted like flowers. It was sweet and weird and kind of good. But also, he was eating a worm, so there was that.
You spoke with the captain?
Slime's bulbous eyes blinked rapidly. Nex nodded.
Yep.
Slime fidgeted, clearly expecting more. When Nex kept his mouth shut, he frowned and dabbed at his eyes with his handkerchief. He decided to take a shot.
What is he?
Nex asked, trying to sound casual.
What do you mean?
Slime's voice sharpened.
What a curious question.
He pushed a little more.
Is he really alive?
Slime's eyes lit up and he rubbed his hands together.
Well, that's a very impertinent question to ask. Indeed, very impertinent.
He scolded. Then switching his bulbous eyes around, he moved closer to Nex and his voice dropped to a whisper.
The captain, you see, he's a fascinating integration of biocompatible systems. His molecular electronics and neural interfaces, they work together almost perfectly. But shh, we mustn't speak too loudly of such things.
How did it happen?
Slime bustled over to a cabinet and started popping vitamin supplements like they were candy. His earlier caution evaporated as he launched into the tale.
Before the disaster, Captain Grimhelm was quite a powerful man. I've heard his word was law across 1,000 star systems. Such power, such influence. Then came the attack. His ship incinerated, his body burned beyond recognition. Oh, what a dreadful affair it was.
Nex wanted to ask more, but he was also wondering if he really wanted to know. The more he learned about this crew, the weirder and scarier it got.
Why'd someone attack him?
Slime glared at him.
Why? One can only wonder, my curious friend.
Slime reached for a blender that contained a swampy concoction with an occasional alien tuber sailing by. He poured the gurgling mixture into a glass and took a cautious sip. His lips puckered as if he had bitten into a sour lemon.
Good!
But Captain Grimhelm.
Yes, the captain. Well, I was not there, you understand. I did not meet the captain until many years later. But from what I was told, a scientist salvaged what remained of him. Experimental biocybernetics kept him alive. I don't know if you're familiar with the discipline, but it's very new, very developmental. Even now, we scientists who work with biocybernetics can do things, remarkable things, for a while, and then they expire. But the captain, he survived. A miracle of science, one might say. Or perhaps something else entirely.
The story seemed impossible, but Slime was talking like he actually believed it.
Whole grain fennel crickets.
Slime crooned, retrieving a plate. Nex prayed that it wasn't another weird breakfast food. A holographic alert flashed above the table. Slime squinted at it, his expression shifting from curiosity to irritation.
Always something, always.
He grumbled, pushing his breakfast aside. He tapped a few commands into a touchpad. The hologram dissolved into a rotation of data.
Protein synthesis anomaly. You do know how to handle bioengineered cybernetic limbs, don't you?
Nex swallowed hard, fighting to keep his face straight.
Sure, I can help.
Excellent.
Slime's eyes narrowed.
But do be careful. One wrong step and we'll be knee-deep in viscera.
2 days passed aboard the Nebula Nighthawk in a haze of artificial night cycles. When Nex wasn't laying low, he found himself helping Dr. Slime, grabbing tools and samples. The Luminids projects were all over the place and pretty bizarre. He tinkered over a bioengineered skin that could change color and texture, and a thing that supposedly told you what plants were feeling. He spent a lot of time messing around with a gadget with wobbly antennas. He said it was from some lost advanced civilization. Nex had to admit, even though he was super weird, Slime was pretty brilliant. The Luminid's mind seemed to operate on a different level, leaping from one idea to another with dizzying speed. But most of the time, he couldn't actually keep pace with what he started, and ended up with a trail of goopy, half-finished wreckage. Surprisingly, Nex found himself granted a measure of freedom aboard the ship. Several hours in the afternoon, Slime spent hunched over his computer, typing and going over diagrams. During this time, Nex got to know the layout of the ship. It was compact. Nex could move from one end to the other in just a couple of minutes. The top deck housed the bridge, captain and officer's quarters, and situation room. Below that, living quarters and common areas, medical and engineering. The lower levels, deck 3, 4, and 5, had the cool stuff. The armory, docking bay, cargo, maintenance, stealth, and a bunch of high-tech systems. The crew was a small group of seasoned pilots, technicians, and guerrillas. They looked like they'd seen some serious stuff, all rugged and brown, scarred up and tattooed. They mostly ignored Nex, which was fine. When they did look at him, they didn't seem to know what to think. Except for that one guy, Ironclaw. He actually nodded at Nex once. Captain Grimhelm remained an unseen presence, but Nex noticed that Slime went to his room every day with a mysterious black case. He had no idea what that was about. It was during one of these sessions that Slime left a hologram active at his workstation. It showed all the plans for the pirates' next big score. Nex couldn't help himself. He sneaked over to take a closer look. It was a high-stakes robbery of a heavily guarded Discovery Foundation convoy. The more Nex dug into it, the crazier it got. He flipped through page after page of complicated plans and diagrams, trying to make sense of it all. He figured this was his only chance.
DC, copy everything,
he whispered. DC plugged into Slime's computer and softly began siphoning data. But then, oh man. As he was scrolling, his blood turned to ice. Captain Grimhelm was planning to use Nex to get past all the convoy's sophisticated security systems. He was to be the key that unlocked their prize. Nex started skimming through everything as fast as he could. What could be so valuable that they'd risk all this? And then he saw it. Darkcore shards. You've been listening to Darkcore Frontiers. If you enjoyed the story, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Wondrous Legends. And if you like this production, you can help us make Season 2 by supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/wondrouslegends. Thank you for listening.